Good evening and welcome to another episode of What's So Funny. I'm Guy McPherson, and our guest this week is Orny Adams, a hilarious comedian. Perhaps you know him from Teen Wolf, or maybe just from stand-up. He has specials out. He tours around North America. Who are we kidding? You probably know him from the documentary Comedian. Now, he will claim that you don't, probably. And if you're young enough, he's right. You don't know that. Unless you're into stand-up comedy as an art form, and you go back to 2002 and look up that documentary starring Jerry Seinfeld. Orny and I have had I think, a great relationship from the time I interviewed him. When was that? Back in 2013, he came to Vancouver for the first time as part of the Just for Laughs comedy tour. So that was about a year ago. This time he was at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club, where he just destroyed. I mean, standing ovation every show in a club. Yeah, he's that good. So anyway, but back when I interviewed him in 2013, we had a great phone conversation, and then I wrote a story about him and the tour, and then I read a tweet from him shortly after that. Now, he was probably the most well-known name on that tour. I forget who the others were. Pardon me if you think that you're more well-known than him. But so he did a lot of interviews across the country. Then I did my story. Shortly after that, he tweeted something like, "When will a journalist get it right?" And me being the overly sensitive type, I thought, was he talking about me? But, it could have been any other story that came out on him. And so I wrote to him and I said, "Hey, hope you weren't talking about me," because, I thought it was a pretty positive story. And he said, "Yeah, it turns out it was me." So we had a great email exchange going back and forth. And we talk about it here on this episode. It's a long one, too. Ooh, it's good. I mean, he's a great guest. And let me just read you, because I didn't have this at the time we did the interview. In the third paragraph of the story I wrote, I said, "Critics described him as unctuous, mediocre, petulant, and unlikable in the 2002 film. That was eons ago, pop culturally speaking. He was, as a cocky and neurotic up-and-coming star, more concerned with fame than anything else. But by most accounts, he is a powerhouse now, a comic who hits the stage with energy and solid jokes, leaving the audience breathless with laughter." And it goes on from there. So, but of course, if you're a sensitive stand-up, you're going to see those negative words and go, why does he have to keep harping on something that happened so long ago? And then I also said, as we talked about in the story, I wrote, "As we're more aware in the age of reality TV than we were 11 years ago, the edit you get on screen dictates perception. And Adams's was largely negative, but he's okay with it." And then I gave a quote from him. So that's the context. That's the backstory of where we find ourselves in our, it's about an hour and 40-minute talk with Orny Adams. It was a good one, and I always like hashing it out with comics instead of just hidden resentment. We ended on a good place. We started on a good place, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Here's my talk with Orny Adams.
Now, what if I wanted headphones? I guess you could do a headphone splitter out of it.
Forget it. You're the guest. I'm the host. I get the headphones. Orny Adams, how are you?
Great.
So nice to meet you. After we spoke last year on the phone. Was it last year? Last winter, yeah.
Right, for the Just for Laughs.
Just for Laughs. I didn't get to go see the shows.
Now, why is that?
I have a life, Orny. You think I can just drop everything? See every show that comes to town?
I kind of do.
Yeah.
I would think the Just for Laughs tour is something special that comes through town once a year. Am I correct?
Yes. I can't remember what I had, but I go to them all.
Except the one I was on.
Yeah. But thankfully, I saw you last night here at Yuck Yucks. Theater shows are one thing and club shows are another. And they can both be great, but I love the little intimate shows. I don't know if you have a preference for where you play. Obviously, money aside.
It's a totally different muscle. So playing a theater, the challenge is filling that stage and connecting with people that are in the balcony.
Yeah.
And that to me feels like a more structured sort of environment. Whereas here, it was going to go wherever it went.
And it did.
It was all over the place.
Yeah.
But in a fun way.
It sure was.
Unapologetically, I sort of try and... Because sometimes when I get off stage, I think, well, I should have said to that kid, you're the worst participant that I could have picked for this joke. You're the worst example. And so now I try and think what I'm going to be think about later and say it in that moment.
And you do, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what you said to the kid, right? So just whatever thought comes into your head, obviously there's like a 1 second delay.
Yes. And I try and say it because I think it got to the point where I was yelling at him, telling him he was my ISIS. He was that bad for my show. He was beheading my show metaphorically. But I do it in a way that everybody knows it's a joke. I mean,
yes, of course.
He came up to me afterwards and he was thrilled. And he got his free towel and T-shirt.
Free. Jeez.
Free. Didn't even charge him the 20 Canadian, 1875 American. What happened to your exchange rate?
Lucky guy. Yeah, I know. Remember, we were ahead of you for a while.
Yeah. Wow, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah.
We're in Yuck Yucks. I'd like to set it up here,
Please,
like an NPR interview. I'm talking to Guy McPherson. We're in Yuck Yucks. And that's when like little music would come on. And...
I'll put that in.
Yeah. So when we walked in, the girl who let us in, I assume she is the box office girl.
I assume too.
Right. So when I used to...
Or a squatter.
I don't know what... yeah. I used to call the clubs before people knew more of who I was. I mean, still, she probably has no idea. But I would call and say, who's there this weekend? And they go, just a second, Orny Adams. I go, well, what has he done? Has he done anything? Would I know? Well, he's been on Friday night videos. And I'm like, is he funny? And I'd see how they sold the show. And I'd see if they'd say it with, and if they didn't.
With conviction.
Yes, I would go down to the club and I would, flirt or be nice or offer to get them coffee or whatever it was to make them really, with enthusiasm, be excited about the show. Because that's important. People are calling the clubs. I don't know if they call anymore, I assume.
That's right. I don't know either, but I remember being a young guy calling clubs before I knew and asking that very question.
Right.
Because people are going to spend $20 or whatever it was back when I was doing it, and it's kind of a risk if you don't know the name.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why you trust a club like Yuck Yucks to only employ comics who are going to deliver at a certain level.
Yeah.
There's sort of a brand, when we go to a Starbucks and there's a new blend of coffee, it shouldn't suck.
Ideally.
Yes, it should at least be on par.
That's right. It may not be to your tastes, but you will realize this is a professional cup of coffee.
Right. So when I do media now, and they say, you got to see this guy, I go, hang on a second. Go to YouTube, watch some clips, and see if my comedy is to your liking. See if somebody told me once, nobody ever says, let's go out and listen to music tonight.
Yeah.
If you're going to the symphony, if you're going to rap, if you're going to rock, at least what genre.
Yeah. You don't put on a blindfold and head to
right. And go, man, we're going to go see rap. And then all of a sudden, they're playing Beethoven. You're like, oh, this sucks. Like, be informed. There's no reason you shouldn't be an informed consumer nowadays.
So check out some clips. Everyone has clips.
Yes.
At your level, or even below you, everyone has clips.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely. But there is a problem that it's not the same. I guess you can get an idea of whether you're going to hate somebody or not, but it is so much better live.
I agree.
Yeah.
And what's fun about live is I'm working on a whole new hour, and it's not all there, and it's interesting to see what works one night, what doesn't work, what works in what position, how moving it around affects a joke and stuff like that. Like, one of my favorite bits I did last night, this is totally new. Usually when I do a bit a few times and it doesn't get the roar that I want, I sort of get discouraged. But that bit about the aliens building the pyramids, to me, I really like, because I find it absolutely insulting that people don't think the Egyptians could have built the pyramids. I think,
insulting to the Egyptians.
The Egyptians.
Yeah.
What are you saying that they couldn't have built? And I'm not that impressed with this triangle thing. To me, it doesn't impress me. And I go on to say in the bit that if I were to build, I've never built anything in my life. If I were to build something, it would probably be a pyramid. The first day I'm all excited and I lay down the foundation, and then the next day a little less excited, and then a little less, and each level gets, and next thing you know, the last day I'm like, screw it, I just put one block on the top and I go, it's a pyramid.
Done.
Yeah. You did that without aliens? Yeah. So to me, that's a really interesting bit because it doesn't get the response. Sometimes it really they get it and they applaud it. But there are nights like last night where it was flat.
Was it? Because the payoff there about doing a little bit less every day, that is the brilliant part of that joke.
Thank you.
And so maybe it was that it took a while to get to that.
Maybe, but I didn't feel like the whole room was with me. So here's another example of a bit that's on the same par. Like I've got several bits where I like to play with the audience, and each night I play differently. So last night when I did the I eat meat, and at the end I do the vegan line. Yeah. I won't go through the whole bit, but and you think the joke is over. You think the joke is over. I'm going to look around a little. I'm going to take a sip. I'm thinking, how long can I wait before I say, you know what's in the word vegan? Now, they don't even know this is coming. And so last night, I waited too long, and then I sort of threw the line away off mic. What's in the word vegan? Nothing. It's probably short for vegetables again.
Yeah.
So that to me is a great joke where you think it's over when I do the caveman example about how meat got its name. It's over. I take my time, and then all of a sudden I drop this bomb, the vegan bomb. It
hit, though, last night, right?
Yeah, but sometimes it explodes.
Oh, okay.
And I like that because that's a joke where I'm playing with timing, and each night I do it differently until I know the exact. So when I did the Tonight Show for the first time, the reason I loved that set so much was I knew I had been doing those jokes for so long that you could yell out at any point in that joke, something could happen, a light could explode, and I could recover. I also knew the exact timing that worked for every single one of those jokes because I told it hundreds of times. So it was rock solid. Nothing could go wrong in that set. It was going to be delivered to the standards that I was capable at the time. Whether you think it's funny or not, I feel like that was what I was capable of. With jokes like that, I'm still finding and playing within that space where it should be. Should it be 2 seconds? Should I take a sip of the water? I've noticed if I take a sip of the water and go for the gulp, it doesn't deliver as much as if I just take the bottle, put it to my lip, and then put it down.
Wow, all these subtle little differences that the audience doesn't even notice, maybe from show to show.
They shouldn't, because if they do notice, then they're too aware.
Right. But can you be too aware?
Sometimes.
I'm thinking, you're talking about that Tonight Show set, and it's so it backwards and forwards. Can that hurt you because it's too well?
Yes, I will say this. I think at the time when I did it, comedy was different, and I think that's the way you delivered comedy. I think in the last 10 years or so, comedy has become more loose, where it's sort of just It shouldn't feel as polished. It shouldn't feel like a joke. So like when I'm doing that DMV joke about the registration sticker and I do that final line, the final line is very jokey and I deliver with a little bit of shame. So 10 years ago, people would have been like, that's a great callback within the joke. That's a great way to tie it up.
Applause break.
Yeah. But now it sort of becomes, well, now the joke went from really realistic to that's kind of he didn't do that part. So now do we believe the rest of the joke? It's got to be more from the heart. And so when I opened last night and I was talking about all the little stickers that are on apples and tomatoes and how infuriating, it really isn't a premise that goes anywhere into, I would say, a structured joke. It's more of an angsty, here's my personality. And I just did that off the cuff 9 days ago, I think, at the Comedy Magic Club for the first time. And it got such a reaction. And I was just so frustrated. And then in the middle of it, I saw a table to the right talking. And I go, hey, And then everyone laughed even more. And then we were into the set. So that's what I was trying to do last night. And then within allowing myself that freedom up there, maybe a line comes, I figure out what the bit is really about.
Right.
That's
in the moment.
In the moment. And that's what the adrenaline of the stage does, and the realities that you're up there. You can't get that when you're in a coffee shop writing, or you're walking around alone, or you're on the phone with a friend. When you're composing, these are places I compose up on stage, so I'm allowing myself. So when I did this set at the Comedy Magic Club 9 days ago, and I watched that 5 minutes where I didn't know where I was going, I thought, if I could do that on television, if I could walk out and have no clue, beginning to end, what jokes, I'm going to do 5 minutes, I'm going to pull from the hour plus that I'm currently working on, that would be amazing. And I started to fantasize that a show like The Tonight Show, now I'm not into doing late night shows anymore, but a show like The Tonight Show or Conan or something, every single night, it would be so cool if they put, the show's over, hey, now we got Orny Adams is going to come out and do 5 minutes, and just tape it, just to see if anything interesting happens.
And then they could use it, maybe.
Then they could use it.
Yeah.
Or not use it.
Yeah.
Or have a comedy corner online, something corny like that.
Yeah, that would be, because last night you said, what if I was taping my special now, when this guy in the front row was not agreeing with everything, every premise that you went with.
He wasn't agreeing, he just wasn't a good example.
He wasn't a good example.
He wasn't with his girlfriend, that was his cousin.
Yeah.
He was 21, he admitted he was dumb. You know, he wasn't shocked. It was like...
Yeah. So, and you said, what if this was my special? And I just thought, you could handle it.
Uh-huh.
You know, it would be great to see a special like that where things, you know, as you say, come out with 5 minutes that you don't know where you're going with it, but you sort of have an idea, you have an attitude about something, and then see what comes up in the moment. Right? I mean, I'd love to see a special like that.
I think that's where comedy needs to go.
Yeah.
I think it has to be fearless. And when I say fearless, I'm not saying let's get up there and talk about subjects that, you know, I think are, people are trying to appear fearless. To me, it's not the subject matter. It's being brave enough to go into these uncomfortable places and then admit it and be loose. And I think with all this reality television, scripted, which is what I feel comedy felt like 20 years ago and up until maybe 10 years ago, it's sort of fading. And it's got to feel like, they've got to feel like this is fresh, or maybe you've had the premise before, but you're molding it for that situation. So if that had aired last night, I think it would have been hilarious.
It would have been, yeah.
And now I know. So if that ever comes up in a special or a taping, I know.
Leave it in. Well, I mean, it comes with your years of experience, too, that you're confident enough to let things go where they go.
Well, you know, am I not close enough? I think the audience likes the noise when the mic stand. We should tell people I took the mic stand from the stage. You're holding your mic.
You don't use it on stage, but you're using it here.
I don't use, in a room this size, I don't even need the microphone.
No. You go in and out and yell. And,
yeah. At one point, I got confused and I was talking into my water bottle.
Yes, you were.
That was funny.
Just some in your hand. I'll talk to that.
You know, I did the Halifax Comedy Festival last year.
Congratulations.
It's a big deal. And I guess that I don't know what network that airs on.
CBC, I believe.
So that's a legitimate network.
Sure.
So I think they're putting me on 4 or 6 shows because I ended up doing, I was at the end and I ended up doing like 25 minutes. And they're going to cut it.
Way.
Because I guess Americans can only be on a certain percentage of a show
Is that
legally.
right?
We can only be on like 4 minutes of a half hour or something. Bizarre. But there was a moment where I was doing a bit, and now I don't feel this loose on American television, but up here in Canada, I feel loose for some reason.
There's no stakes here.
There are, but I don't feel like...
Yeah, not for you.
Right.
Right.
Right. So I feel a freedom up here. It's an away game that nobody's watching. So I'm doing a bit, and there's sort of a break in the bit, and all of a sudden, I look up and the jib camera is maybe 4 or 5 inches from my face. And I go, how much closer is that going to get to my face? I go, I'm going to look at this in 6 months. And you go, I can't believe what I look like. I'm disgusted by the way. I was at a baseball, and I went into this story, which is true. I was at a baseball game the week before, and the couple in front of me was taking a selfie, And they took so I photobombed it and made a face, and then the picture came up on the screen, and I saw it, and I said, I wasn't kidding. I go, hey, can we do that again? I don't like the way it came out. And I said that on the special.
Yeah, just because it came to you because that guy was that close.
Right. So now if you're doing a traditional television set in America on one of the late shows and it's 5 minutes, you don't have time to do that. And you're thinking, well, if I cut that, then I got to go here. Then I got to go, because I don't want them to yell at me if we go a minute over. That isn't comedy. Mm-hmm. That isn't, you don't tell the jazz musician you have exactly 6 minutes. You know, it's like the dude's on heroin. He's gonna go for wherever he goes. You know, that's my impression of jazz musicians.
Yeah, they're all on heroin.
Well, the old ones.
But you know, I was watching Comedian today.
Wow,
Orny. I told you I hadn't watched it since it came out, and I hadn't. And then
me
this
either.
morning, I thought, I wonder if it's on YouTube. So I just fast forwarded to your clips. And there was a point where you were doing a bit and somebody yelled out, "Are you gay?"
Yeah.
And it really bothered you.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, too, last night where nothing bothered you. You just went with whatever anybody said.
Yeah.
And was that a conscious thing that you've learned over the years and, you know, just embrace and go with it? Or does it still piss you off?
When I get heckled or...
I mean, I always think of heckling as a negative.
Well,
where rather just somebody who doesn't know any better just yelling something out.
Yeah, you know, two things, and I'm going to answer that question, but you know me, it takes a little bit to get there.
Okay.
I have two specials out. I have Takes the Third, which is my second one, and then I have Path of Most Resistance. Now, if you listen to those specials, I have very specific lines that I'm to hit. So when I write, I have... Now, when I lived in New York, I lived in the same building as Dave Chappelle, and I used to go hang out with him upstairs in his place, and he would just have a line, just a premise, and then he'd get up on stage, and that's how he would write. And my process was, I have a line, I have another line, I have another line, and another line. So when I'm here, I'm thinking I got to get to B, to C, to D, to E, and if I don't, then I failed. Okay? So that night, when they were taping Comedian, and the cameras are there, and... Just for Laughs is there. Bruce Hills was there. I didn't need somebody getting in the way of A, B, C, D. And maybe you're gay had nothing to do with whatever I was talking about.
Yeah,
you know?
You're saying you're single by choice. Yeah.
So that's a joke, and I forgot I did that. I'm single by choice, not my choice.
Yes.
You know, maybe
yeah, that's it.
And it's like that's a joke that I see that appears quoted in books and like joke books and stuff. So it's a good one-liner that got interrupted. You know, when you got one line and you got interrupted, you know, this isn't a 30-second, a 2-minute bit where somebody yells out, you know, maybe I'm single by choice. Maybe you're gay. You know, yeah, that's it. Because gay people, they're not single or in relationships. The heckle made no sense. Now I would go off on the guy in this tone and go, it makes no sense. What are you saying? Gay people can't be single or gay? I mean,
right.
You're stupid.
Exactly.
And then that turns the audience into liking you. You can turn a bad audience member into, you know, I'm the victim, and make everybody like you. You don't come out and say I'm the victim, but you make it so they're so unreal. Like the guy last night. There was a guy last night that was pro door handle or so. I don't know. I said something about door handles and he cheered and he was...
Something weird, yeah.
What was interesting is usually in my shows, there are older people. This was a really young crowd last night. And usually I can work off the older... Well, I wish you had sat in the front. And you're not even old enough to, you know, to serve as the example. I need another 10 years on you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But because they were young, it threw you?
Well, it didn't give me the chance to do the getting the whole bit the way I like to do it. I like to look at an older guy, you know...
Guy who's been beaten down.
I like to... Because I usually look at a guy and go... I go, look at you. I go, you're married, I can tell. And I go, how many kids? And I guess it's usually 2. I go, 1, 2, or 3. I go, wait, 2 kids? And they're like, yeah. Like, for some reason, I get it right. And I go, and people like applaud. I go, I can look into another man's face. I go, let me tell you something, sir. I can tell because those kids ruined your face. Look what they did to your face. Look at you. Look at you. They age. Those kids should send you every Father's Day a card that says, sorry, I ruined your face. Right? And everybody's laughing and he's into it. And then I stand up on the chair and I go, look at me. I'm 64 years old. No kids. I'm living the dream. You could have looked like this. And so there was no example for that. Right. There was nobody to work the younger guy who was supposed to be dumb off of an older guy. The young guy wasn't even answering the questions correctly. It was chaos last night.
But it didn't derail the show, and that's a testament to you.
Yeah.
You know, because some comics, something goes a little askew, and they get upset or they get lost. Right, but you're just now rolling with it.
I was lost the entire set
you were
last
lost,
night.
but we didn't know it.
Yeah,
that's the difference.
I had just flown in. I didn't sleep the night before. I came in. I hit the ground and did some media, and then went straight to the show. It was coffee, and then I go, man, I didn't have a chance to really look at my notes. I like to spend a few hours. Like tonight. I'll spend an hour or two before going over the notes. I'll write down every bit I forgot to do last night. Oh, yeah, that was supposed to go here. That's why I didn't do this correctly. And by tomorrow night, Saturday, it will be a much more fluid set,
awesome.
I believe.
I'm coming back.
Oh, great.
I think. Unless something comes up.
Oh, I thought you had a life. What happened to your life?
Wait. I said if something comes up. No, it's great. But I'm really interested to know you before. We mentioned comedian. That was 15 years ago, whatever it was. But where did you come from to get there? You were 29 when that was made, and an accomplished comic then. Although if you look back, you've grown so much since then as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
But how did you get chosen to be on that show?
Well, first, if you don't continue to grow, then get out of the business. Because you're going to be on stage and appear, you notice I look at the stage every time I say it, and appear, that's my Boston accent, stale. You will be stale. You've got to keep growing and evolving. That's really one of the things I always admired about Gary Shandling, was he always challenged himself to go into a new direction. A new energy, try something different. And I think that's important. And otherwise, you're a comic that's still doing the same jokes or the same style. And I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. If I dated you 5 years ago, I'm different now. I'm more empathetic than I've ever been. I'm more aware of how I affect people. And when I did comedian, I had been doing it about 10 years. And I had moved from Boston, and I'd been in New York for maybe 4 years, and was really getting a lot of stage time, meaning on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I could do 22 to 30 shows in a weekend. I could write a joke on a Thursday and be sick of telling it by Sunday. And the clubs were working around my schedule. I could call stand-up and go, well, the cellar just gave me this. Can you move? Sure. Okay, comic strip, can you squeeze me in? Can I switch with so-and-so? They were doing things.
How many years in were you then? 4 or 5?
10 years. Or 9
when
or
you
10
could call around to the clubs and
Yes.
have them rearrange.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Kerry Hoffman.
So you were making waves.
Yes, I felt like I was. When you'd bump into the same people, it's Louis C.K. and then Dave Attell and it was like the same comics, Dane, just all bound. We were part. I felt like I was part of a you hear that if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, and I felt like I had achieved, and it didn't need to go any higher than that. It didn't need, although you always thought sitcom is the goal. It didn't. I felt like I had arrived. And all of a sudden, Seinfeld show goes off the air, and he comes back to New York, and he's going to do comedy, and which means he's going to come to the clubs unannounced. And people like me who have worked years to get the Saturday night 9 o'clock show at the Cellar and be a prime spot in the middle of the show, not, you know what I mean? And you invite all your friends out because this is one of the greatest things to ever happen. You are a working comic, New York City, prime time, weekend. No, you're not. You're now off the show. So your friends that paid to see you are now not going to see you and don't care because they get to see Seinfeld,
right,
which is a bigger deal. And it's so soul-wrenching, and it's so sort of like humiliating and real. And it was emotion that I never had to deal with. And Seinfeld had a camera crew with him. And I kept running I walk into the clubs, and I go, oh, shit, the cameras are here. Jerry's coming. Now, this is before Twitter or any of that, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't tweet people. You couldn't text your friends and go, don't come, or whatever. Damn it, Jerry. And I got to know the camera guys. And they said, can we ask you some questions on camera? This is at Gotham Comedy Club on 23rd. And I said, sure. And they said, you keep seeing her around town. And have you seen Jerry's act? I said, yeah. And they said, well, what do you think of it? And I go, no, I'm angry at this guy. I go,
were you a fan?
Oh, of the show? An amazing fan.
And of his stand-up.
His stand-up was before my time. So I didn't grow up watching him. I didn't see how impressive. Now, when I talked to older comics, what he was doing was groundbreaking. He didn't blow me away because I'm a Boston comic, and I'm used to this like frantic, like get it out, machine gun approach to comedy. And Jerry, all I knew of his stand-up was the interstitial bits that were on his show.
Seinfeld, yeah.
The show I couldn't have been a bigger fan of.
Okay.
And in general, looking back, I love his mind. I get Jerry. And watching him since, I'm just hugely impressed with his rhythm, economy of words, everything it takes to be a great comedian. Jerry is. Jerry has a comedic mind, and there aren't that many out there. And Jerry's a guy that, when my special came out on Comedy Central, and I hadn't spoken to him in a while, I got a call immediately the next day. Orny, Jerry. I'm going, who's Jerry? Like, it had been that long. And I go, Jerry, who? And he goes, it's Seinfeld. And I was in a coffee shop. I go, and I had gone to a coffee shop to see if anybody recognized me. This is the truth.
Yeah.
It was on Comedy Central. I go, here we go. Here we go. I'm going to be playing theaters. This just bought me a house. Nothing. Nobody recognized me. I went out. I go, someone's got to come up to me. But Seinfeld called me. And he said, call me when you're on a landline. He's very paranoid. So
why?
No, he just wanted me to be not in a coffee house.
Yeah. Cutting out.
I couldn't get a word in. Jerry went on for over an hour and broke down every one of my bits and what he liked about it. And he was so passionate. And I thought, geez, it'd be great if he ever said this publicly. That would be, I'd really appreciate that, Jerry. But at that moment, I fell in love with him because I go, this is a guy that truly loves and respects stand-up comedy and gets it and understands what I'm trying to do. And I was having a conversation with, I could never have it with my girlfriend or a wife or my parents or my sisters. It was a conversation that I could only have with a Seinfeld, that I've had with Shandling, that I've had with Robin Williams. I mean, and it almost brings tears to your eyes because it's like, it feels like the greatest form of acceptance, being able to have this conversation. Wow, there's somebody else in the world that understands why I shouldn't have taken a sip at that point. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they look at it that critically. And that
one time, Shandling said to me, he pulled me aside after one of my Tonight shows, and he was wearing sunglasses. He took off his sunglasses, and he said, look me in the eye. He goes, look at me. He goes, do you understand what level that you just performed? And I mean, I was blown away. I mean, you can't breathe. You just want to cry and hug. And, this man, it's just such love, acceptance. The reason I'm a comedian is because I want acceptance. I don't feel that acceptance in life most of the time. I'm more myself on stage. If I could be that guy all the time, if I could walk into a restaurant and feel that respect and people want to listen, it'd be fantastic. My family doesn't give me that sort of, they still make fun of me and they treat me like anybody else. So, and I said to Gary, I can't even, I'm blown away. And I go, Gary, I feel like at this point, and again, I'm breaking down like 2 minutes, I said this and I should have said, and I feel like you could tell that I was thinking. And he said, I saw the mistakes, but nobody else did.
Right.
Seinfeld gave me one of the greatest lessons of all time. And when I tell this story, most people go, wow, what an asshole. But we were in Baltimore. And we were playing this theater, this gorgeous theater. And I said, I'm thinking of opening with this joke. Jerry goes, don't open with it. And so I went out there and opened with it.
Just to show them.
I don't know. Yes, we're very competitive. Sometimes we're like, I feel like we're like brothers. We're very, it's very primal. And I did it. I was going to do it. And I did it. And I ended up getting a standing ovation. And I look off to the side, and there's Jerry about to come on. And I thought, well, he's going to have to give it to me. He's going to have to give it to me. And he looks at me, and he said, how long you been doing it? I go, 10 years. And he goes, I was making the same mistakes at 10 years too. And walked right past me and blew the room away with his own style, which is less frantic and less loud. And it's just, and I learned from that.
What though? Because you, by all accounts, weren't making a mistake.
Because my joke was too stupid to know how dumb I was. I had an arrogance. And I needed to be stripped of this arrogance.
It wasn't a good joke now in retrospect, is what you're saying?
Probably was a fantastic joke.
So then what was the stupid part?
I think because because the jokes are getting laughs, because you get a standing ovation, you're doing everything correct. And you're probably not. Now, I've never been one that I feel uses trickery, but there are plenty of comedians out there that use hooks and tricks and get those sort of reactions. And what he was saying was, yeah, you got a standing ovation. Yeah, they reacted. But guess what? Your fifth joke should have had 2 more lines on it. Could have made it funnier. That joke should have been moved over here. That joke you shouldn't have even done because it's a topic that's been mined too hard. He got it. I wasn't using the mic stand properly. He got it. And there are very few people that are going to get it on this level. Seinfeld's one of them. And it is such a pleasure to have these conversations with these people because they get it on a level that, can only, like sometimes, painters will paint something. It's not for us. It's for other painters. Musicians do it.
That's what I was going to say. You're not playing to the Jerry Seinfelds of the world. You're playing to that crowd that gave you a standing ovation. So if you can't judge by their reaction...
Because you can do it at the standards of the Jerry Seinfelds and still go for that yield. Mm-hmm. Then you've done it both.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to, like you say, do the tricks in order to get an applause break or a standing ovation. But if you feel that you've done it without the tricks and done it to the best of your ability, then that's a win.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but I think a lot of really good comedians will tell you if the audience is too hot, they'll bring it down on purpose. If it's too hot from the comic before me, I always bring it down. Because I go, well, you guys aren't in reality. Let me show you.
Right.
And control them and then build it up.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is that, yes, it's about the audience. It always is. But you can deliver. So, there are bands that, I was reading an article in the New Yorker on the plane about Billy Joel. I've always appreciated Billy Joel. But when this guy broke it down, you kind of came to understand that Billy was a guy that was just writing pop ballads and just sort of, it was saccharine or whatever. Whereas a Bruce Springsteen is, trying to write prose the way Bob Dylan did and to make popular music, but that got the respect. And I don't think he was doing it to get the respect. I don't do it so Seinfeld looks at me. I do it because that's what brings me pleasure, is to crack the code.
Right.
And to do it in a way that I think maintains the level of, the respect for comedy that, I really think when you watch like a Chris Rock and you see comedy done at that level, you just go, wow, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And you want to be part of that. And you are part of that.
Well, I don't think, you do want to be part. I always wanted to, there are some comics that have exploded in recent times that are never brought up in those circles, never discussed, never get the respect. You know what I mean? And I think that what would be the worst thing as a comic is to be selling out huge venues and your peers don't respect you. I think that that would bother me.
Yeah, in their mansions, it would. probably bothers them.
It honestly probably.
Yeah.
I know you're laughing, but
no, I believe that. Yeah.
I know it would bother me. Now, maybe they're sort of like, well, this is a business, and that's all I wanted to do, and the people are laughing, and that's all that matters. And I understand that approach to comedy, but that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. And I don't begrudge those people. I don't get angry at those people. They're making a living, and the audiences are laughing, so it's legitimate. But for me, it's sort of like, painting a picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're empty calorie laughs. The audience is laughing, but
yeah,
they're not nourished.
And what are they? And to me, it's the takeaway. So one night I was at the where was I? Laugh Factory in Los Angeles, and comics were going on and just ripping that place apart. I mean, just belly laughs, pounding tables, and then Gaffigan got up, and you can imagine Gaffigan in that context. They're not pounding the tables always. I don't remember that night, but I remember I couldn't stop thinking about his jokes. Remember the next day I was still thinking about his jokes, and I thought, it isn't how loud they laugh. It's, do they take a piece of you home when they leave? I want the audience to leave with a piece of me, to understand me, to sort of, connect.
Because sometimes there's comics where you go and you laugh, and then you try to think of any of their jokes. Or maybe if you do think of one, it doesn't translate at all after the fact. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's more a presence that they have.
Yes.
Now, to be able to combine the two, have the presence and the material, that's the trick.
Yeah, when I was starting out, there was in Boston, Anthony Clark.
Yeah.
And man, Clark, the minute he got on stage, I mean, he didn't even hit the microphone and you loved him. Sandler. There was one night I couldn't take it. I was watching the Hanukkah song, and I watched two versions of it. And one of them, he's on SNL doing it, and before he hits that microphone, you love the guy. You just love the guy. And I'm so envious, and I kept rewinding it on the computer and watching it.
Why do we love him?
Why? Yeah. What does he have?
How do I get that?
You can't. It's biological.
Yeah.
Or it's a confidence.
Something.
It's worth examining and studying.
Mm-hmm. We kind of got off track because you were about to say the filmmakers were there and they approached you, and you were pissed off at Seinfeld coming into the clubs.
Yeah, and so I said, what do you think of his comedy? Did I get to this point yet?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of gave it
I go, I've seen it. It's the same comedy, same style he's been doing for 20 years now. It's stale. I think, I don't know exactly. I'm sort of paraphrasing, and I've told the story so many times, I've probably changed the verbiage. But I go, we've seen it. We've seen that. I remember specifically saying this, comedy has evolved, and it's come to a new point, and Jerry's not with that.
And you told the filmmakers.
I had nothing to lose. I had nothing. And I didn't know. I didn't know you're not supposed to say these things. And they showed Seinfeld the clip, and he said he's the only one who has the balls to criticize me. Start following him. So
middle of the movie, this wasn't arranged ahead of time.
Was not arranged ahead of time. Okay. And so now I got these two guys with cameras who present me with a contract for like a after scale or SAG scale of $565 a day, which is, I mean, do you understand? I have to work a weekend and travel to get that kind of money. I'm going to Poughkeepsie for $300 a weekend and taking the train and with expenses. And I'm going to shoot 3 days, and I'm going to make $1,500, $1,600. Oh my God! And I'm going to be in a movie, and I'm going to with Seinfeld, and this is it. This is going to buy me a house. That's what getting the whole is. It's like getting the whole. It's like every time I thought something great, it wasn't. And so they followed me, and having cameras around you at all times is very empowering. And producers are very good at getting you to say certain things, and they also create situations. This is what reality television does. This is what great producers do. Hey man, and I'm not saying that they had evil intentions, but I'm a hell of a subject matter because I at the time I didn't edit at all. I was unaware, and I felt empowered, and I felt an arrogance, as the LA Times said. I was bereft of humility, and I believed in myself. I believed in myself the way I believed Muhammad Ali believed in himself as a boxer. And I
verbally,
I didn't see anything wrong with, to me, nothing excites me more than when a batter walks up to the plate, points to the wall, and then knocks it out of the park. I go, damn it, he did it. And there's a certain level of arrogance that I like. And part of it's a put on, and a lot of it comes from insecurity. And my character now knows how to deliver it in such a way that it reads better. So there's a scene in Comedian where I get to the car and and there's a driver and I go, I have to open my own door.
I saw that today.
Right. Now, that's me. That's my humor. Of course I'm going to open my door. I know where I stand in the world, but my character is going to be trying to be. Now I can get away with it. Now that's the humor that I deliver on Teen Wolf. It's this sort of like, it's sort of a put on, but it didn't read that way in Comedian, and people attacked me for it. And some people loved me for it, but a lot of people.
That's right. And so that leads us to last year when we talked, and I wrote a story about you. And then I saw a tweet from you saying something like, when is a journalist ever going to get it right? You didn't mention me, but I thought, oh, was that me? It
was absolutely you.
It was absolutely.
Absolutely. And I don't remember the article.
But there were worse. I remember there was one from Victoria that was worse.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I didn't, I just think, my problem, and I didn't go back and purposely didn't reread the emails because I believe what's important is going to stick in your mind. And what I do remember was I felt like you still had this impression of me from Comedian and sort of never got away from it. Like, I didn't get the sense you had gone online and watched either of my DVDs. I didn't feel like you got to know me as a person.
I have a life.
I didn't get a sense that you sort of felt that way when we had a phone conversation. And I don't feel like you sort of asked around to get the right impression. So I know you were very sort of negative about me in Comedian, and I can understand that, and I allow that, and I agree with criticism, but I feel like I've moved beyond that, and I was hoping, and I thought in the article you would say, well, you probably didn't like him from Comedian. And I was like, well, Guy, why don't you say I didn't like him in Comedian? Why don't you own the words instead of putting it on somebody else?
Right, because everyone thought that, though.
No, that's not true.
Most people thought that.
No, that's not true. I disagree with you there. There are a lot of people that love Comedian.
You just quoted an LA Times critic.
Who was wrong.
Okay.
I don't know where that critic is now. But why don't we...
You don't know where Stephen Wright is now.
Yeah, I love that. That was funny. And again, that's... listen, that line, I can see where people would be upset. I love Stephen. He's a guy who, I don't know personally, but one of the greatest. One of the greatest. And what I was saying was, how can you be one of the greatest? What happened to him? Where is he? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I was trying to say in that scene. And I can understand how people would take that one way, but I was sort of, I was being attacked by this guy, and I have so many thoughts because I still want to get back to what I was saying about you. And it was wrong that I would throw Stephen under the bus, and I wasn't thinking, but what didn't come through was how much respect I have for Stephen Wright. What was didn't come through. Now, in regards to what people think, I mean, we've been talking about, that podcast that I did this week that I've been getting a lot
Pete
of people.
Holmes?
Right.
Yeah.
Pete was heavily influenced by Comedian in a positive way, started to dress like me and sound like me. And many comedians feel that way, and many people in the business. What became vogue was to throw me under the bus, which we've seen with Dane Cook. We've seen with plenty of comedians. Comedians are vicious. First of all, comedians, which I didn't understand at the time, are very competitive and probably one of the smartest groups of people out there. They're smart people, and they're going to find a reason if they want. In Comedian, I gave them the reason. And I think that's the circle you're running in. The circle that I was being exposed to via Seinfeld were the Carl Reiners that loved it, were Martin Short, people like that. And I was contacted privately by some very influential people that got it, that got the fight, they got the angst, they got what was going on with me, and felt that it was a part of them, including Seinfeld, who said, "You're exactly the way I was. I just wasn't caught on tape saying it."
Right. But do you feel like you said earlier with Seinfeld, you wish that they'd go public with it? These people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's what's funny. What's funny is there are comedians that, and I won't name names, that are right now the like top in alternative or whatever, that are privately take me aside and have nice words, but they would never tweet, they would never, it's like it's an interesting sort of game.
Yeah,
comedy.
There's people we're allowed to like, people we're not allowed to
right.
like. Yeah.
So,
and I don't like to play those games.
I don't either, but like I was watching a documentary on Genesis, and they were talking about how it was never hip to like Genesis for whatever reason. And Phil Collins had hit after hit after hit after hit, and this guy's tortured because he was never respected. And I hope that isn't my case, but yeah, it was sort of like I became the guy. Sarah Silverman said, "You're a villain in a documentary film." And what you have to understand, Guy, is this is a highly edited film.
I was going to say, I allowed for that in the article I wrote about you. I suggested that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until this morning that I was looking, just fast forwarding to your parts, and I realized the job they did on you, now looking for it. All those clips of you saying things that sounded egotistical or whatever, there were short little snippets, one right after another. There was no long segment with you talking. And then, like, I could see it where, there's that little snippet where you would say something and we don't get to see what comes immediately after it, where you're probably saying, of course I don't mean that, but blah, blah, blah. But they're going, there's the soundbite we can use. And there was a whole montage of you sort of talking yourself up.
I'm
and
sure
so
I would cringe if I watched it now.
Yeah, and so I think you got a bum deal. And I don't know if Jerry was involved with the editing. I know that it's probably good to have an antagonist. As Sarah said, the villain in a documentary film, just somebody to go against them. Yeah, we got to see enough of your act and saw it was really good. And then just see how you worry about all the little bits, and your station in life and things like that.
I think that's the part of the film that I'm happy came through, is how much I love comedy and respect it and work. People always come up to me and say, man, you work hard, and I just assume everybody's working at the same level because I love it and this is what I do. So I thought that was cool. But in regards to what you were just saying, I was backstage at the Tonight Show once, and Michael Moore came fly. This guy, I've never seen him move so fast, and his fingers are through the. I have been dying to meet you. He goes, I love you. He goes, I saw that documentary, and I saw how Seinfeld screwed you. He goes, take it from him. I had cameras with me because I was taping a show for CBS, and we were doing some backstage stuff. He goes, and he looks at the camera and goes, I don't even care. I have the video of this. He goes, I don't even care if the cameras are rolling. He goes, I went to that theater with a group of people that I work with, and we all walked out hating Seinfeld and loving you. He goes, I saw it from an editor's eye how they screwed you and what they did to you, and shame on them. And it was fascinating.
And he would know as a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah, he goes, I want to take you out for a beer sometime. Here's my telephone number. And I go, here we go. This just bought me a house. My life is going to change. I'm going to do something with Michael Moore. And I reached out to him. We've never had that beer. And it was years ago. But it was interesting that, like, somebody like that. So when I see you writing about it, I'm like, come on, Guy. Get that this is a edited document. Get that.
I mentioned that.
Yes, you did mention that. But I'm saying, I asked you, I think in an email privately, ask around to some of the comedians. When I leave here, ask the MC if he enjoyed working with me. Ask him if he thinks I was like he thought I was going to be, or ask the club or whatever. It didn't show the humanity that perhaps I have. Now, I don't blame anybody. I said all those things if it's on tape, and I put myself in that position. And I got to be honest with you, Guy, I like being misunderstood at times.
Yeah,
I do. I actually do.
Because it creates discussion, it creates talk about you? What's the reason?
I think that, like, when I'm on stage and I see in somebody's face I don't get it, I think, good. It's on a level that makes you have to, like, work a little bit for it. And I think that, like, you don't want to be so obvious. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they're criticizing Billy Joel because his songs are obvious. They're hitting where they're supposed to hit to be a pop song. They're exactly, 3 minutes long, and the crescendo's here, and it's got the hook and all that stuff. So, yeah, I like sometimes saying things and wondering if people really believe me. I don't know. It's my... But, with comedian... It's a legacy that, until maybe a few years ago, I couldn't emotionally shake. I'm fine with it now, and I feel like I've been in the business long enough and I've put out enough that you can now judge versus that. But for some reason, that article you wrote, I go, God, why is he still... What line? What did you say to me? You probably hated him from Comedian. I
don't know.
Why did
it
you?
Was such a positive article, and you take the one line.
Well, because
you concentrate on that guy in the crowd with his arms crossed, not smiling, right? Is that you too?
No, because I don't think Comedian came out. I like to say before 9/11. That may be an incorrect fact, but I like to say that so it sort of feels...
Probably filmed before then, was it?
It definitely was filmed before.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is before 9/11. We'll say it like that. Didn't come out, but it was before 9/11. And if you look at my audience, which is now getting younger and younger because of Teen Wolf, they have no idea. They don't know what you're talking about. They have no clue.
So for me to go rehash this, it just gets you.
Well, why can't it be... maybe you don't feel this way, so I understand that. But why can't it be, hey, I saw this guy in Comedian, and I wasn't into it. He kind of was off-putting, but I've since watched his comedy, and he seems to have matured and grown, and I like him. And
we try to take ourselves out of the story.
I felt like you were very much in the story, but you were using the guise of you may not have. Because even now, even today, you're saying, no, everybody didn't like you. That's not true. You have to understand, plenty of people liked me in Comedian.
Sure. But as I told you, I think, in an email, you can find a couple of good reviews on Geely, the movie that was just trash, 6% on Rotten Tomatoes. Mm-hmm. Right? So you can find people that like it. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not being
emphatically,
specific.
you said 100% nobody liked you. You just said. Everybody disliked you. So
okay.
I'm disagreeing with you. I'm
okay,
saying,
Mr. Literal.
It's in print, and people
I don't think
read
I said
that
it that way. But yeah. But I did. I did say how you'd moved on from there, and that you weren't that guy. And as I said, I hinted at a possible bad edit.
What couldn't it have been? Maybe I didn't understand the film.
Could have been. Yeah, we're on deadline, I reviewed you this week. I don't believe I even mentioned Comedian.
Wow, this is a milestone for you, Guy. You did it.
Just one. Well, no, that's the thing I was saying. I had to because it was your first time in town. If anybody knows the name Orny Adams, and I was using you, I selected you from the Just for Laughs contingent. There were probably 5 or 6 of you, right? What do people know the name from? Well, if you're a comedy fan and you've watched Comedian, that's how you know the name. And now here's what he is today, which is not that edited version you saw.
That's great. I can't wait to read it. I think.
Well,
the new one.
Yeah, no, so the old one, that's what I'm saying, is I had to bring it up as a reference point. It was your first time in town. Who is this guy? What do you know him from? That's what you know him from.
But what about this possible? And again, you may not feel this way. You may not have liked him in Comedian, but you're going to love him now. Or you may have gotten the wrong impression of him from Comedian. Or my thing is that, like, in this day and age with all the access we have, and I love that you're tying your shoe during this important soliloquy I'm giving.
I'm trying one-handed. Okay, I'll stop.
I think that I felt like you could have made a bigger attempt to get post-comedian Orny and understand. And sort of, to me, that's more important. Like, how do you feel you were portrayed? How did it affect your life? Do you have regrets about it? What would you have done it again? Like, these are all things that I think are interesting, more than just dismissively or emphatically saying, making a broad stroke. You didn't like him. It's a guy you didn't like in comedian. And most people are going, well, I didn't even know comedian. What is, because you're in the comedy community. So you're talking to comics. Now, a lot of comics are negative. You know, you go into any green room and it's like, all right, everyone shut up. Just shut up. Let's look at our notes and let's get up on stage and be funny. So, you know.
Yeah, that would have been a better angle. I should have consulted you before I wrote that.
Thank you.
It would have been, actually. Yeah, how you felt about it.
Yeah, I think that I would never take it back because I've grown as a human being. It's forced me to look inward and to understand how, you know, I think I like I think it's helped mold my life in a positive way. I don't mean to sound like Oprah, but I do sound like Oprah.
Yeah, it has, but I mean, it must have taken a few years after that.
It was devastating. It was devastating because...
So just before you get to that, devastating, you had the thrill of making it, which must have been a thrill, not only monetarily for you, because you didn't have to go to
Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie, I never know how to pronounce that. So you're making this film with Jerry Seinfeld. You're going to get a house.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how long it takes before it comes out, and then you see it, and what the...
Yeah.
Or maybe you liked it, and then you started hearing snippy little comments.
I think what happened was, every time I saw it, now Seinfeld, we had the same manager, George Shapiro at the time, and George said, Jerry wants to fly you to New York, and he wants to show you a cut of the film. And Jerry flew me in, and I met with him, and he said, I want to show you a cut of the film, and I don't think you understand, you're going to be the biggest comedian since Kinison. You're going to break so big right now. Now, this is... I don't even listen when people say things like this anymore because it's never come true. Every deal I've had, I've heard this. Every manager I've had, it just, you can't say that because there's just too many variables in that equation. But Jerry said, I'm going to take you outside. This is a very unique experience he gave me. And I'm going to show you how to be famous. And he walked me through the streets of New York and showed me how to sign autographs and take pictures. And it's funny because when I was... with the club manager here, he said, it is fascinating the way you interact with your fans. Because of Teen Wolf, people come up to me on the street and we take pictures. And he said, it's like you really care. You want to make sure they're happy with the picture, and then you move on. And Jerry was very good at giving everybody a moment and then moving on. And really giving them his attention. And he'd say, that just made me $50. That just made me... He understood the economy of it. I do it because I love people. And I think Jerry genuinely loves people too. And he showed me a cut of the film, and he's sitting there, and I've seen the film 4 times, 5 times. Every time I've seen it except for one time with Jerry sitting next to me, nudging me, doing my lines with me, laughing at everything I say, because he gets it. And he's like, I used to say the same thing. You know, like, he got it. And I felt this security blanket. The security blanket I felt by having George Shapiro. I felt like that bought me security. Wrongly. I was incorrect. And I saw it one time in a movie theater with my friends who snuck me in, and I had a hat on. And in the middle of one of my scenes, a guy a few rows back goes, oh, well, this guy, shut up. And that's when I felt we might have trouble. And I remember one of the screenings we did for all of the comedy community, and I felt like iced afterwards. Like everybody was very cold to me. And that was a weird sign. And then when the publicity came out, they had me on a couple of the late night shows promoting, and they had me doing it was a huge publication. It was like not a Vogue, but a magazine like that we're going to do a pictorial with a very big photographer. All of my media got canceled. Everything.
Once they saw the film. Or once the...
something was going on.
Yeah.
Now I get it. So now, for instance, if I see a film coming out and I see one of the stars tweeting a lot about it or doing Q&As or on certain shows, I go, must not be tracking well. I now get the signs. Then we show up for the premiere, and I'm sitting in the lobby waiting for Jerry, and they're trying to get me into the theater because Jerry didn't want to take any pictures with me on the red carpet, apparently. And I didn't get these signs. And then we did this show, I think it was that show in Baltimore, and the next day comedian came out of the reviews, and I was in the train station because I would have taken the train back to New York, and I went to the newsstand and I bought the Post, the Times, the Washington Post, New York Times, every magazine I could get or newspaper I could get my hands on. This is before the internet, and I had a pile. And I went in the corner and I sat there and I started reading, and it was like a scene from like Usual Suspects, when at the end he starts looking around at the Kaiser Sose has now left the office, and he's seeing all the clues all over the office that he picked up. Do you remember that scene? To tell the story, and all of a sudden you just see the whole house of cards crumble. Like, oh my God, bereft of humanity. And you start seeing the same phraseology, and you go, they must have read one review and they've pulled certain lines, and I got panned, and it was a shock. It was a shock. In my home newspaper, my home Boston Globe coming after me, and there was nothing could protect me. George couldn't protect me. Seinfeld couldn't protect me. Was the whole thing a setup? What was happening? And I became the comic that everybody hated overnight, and I lost work. I lost a lot. Nobody wanted to book me. Everybody thought I was difficult. There are clubs I still can't get into because I'm difficult. I've never been there. I'm not the difficult.
Just from perception.
It's all, so there became a perception. And then it's easy for comics to go, yeah, no, I worked with these assholes. Because I was a guy that was so tunnel vision. I went into a club, I did my work, and then I got off stage and I looked at my notes, and I wasn't watching people before, I wasn't watching people after. I didn't get the diplomacy. I didn't get, hey, go up and say nice job and watch and not make it all about you. It was all about me and getting to that place. And it doesn't work. I'm not an island. I thought I was an island. I thought you can be Bob Dylan. You can be a guy, Bob wrote great songs. Bob didn't have to talk to the media. Bob could be Bob. It doesn't work in comedy, and it certainly doesn't work when you have an audience that has to love and respect you, or they're not going to laugh.
Yeah, it's an individual sport, as it were, but you still have to interact with people, club managers, fellow comics, and the audience.
Right. And I blew it.
So you were devastated.
For years.
Did you retreat?
No. You work harder.
You work harder.
You're going to show everybody.
Yeah, but what were the audiences like? Were you still killing?
Because a lot of people, outside of the comedy community didn't necessarily see it.
Okay.
But there were absolutely, first of all, every interview I had to do was annoying, radio or whatever. And I didn't know, you never really know how you stand. Like, nobody's coming up to you going, hey, everybody hates you. In the, you know what I mean? All the comics hate you. You don't know, because
Right.
people are two-faced. They're nice to you, but behind your back, they're destroying you. It's horrible. There were people that showed up to see me bomb. And one of them was Jeff Davis, who created Criminal Minds and created the show Teen Wolf. He showed up at a show in Los Angeles, was driving down the street, saw my name on the marquee and said, that's the guy from Comedian. I didn't like him. Went there to see my show, and he said he was blown away.
Right.
And he said, I went back several times, and I couldn't believe what I was watching, and compared to what was in that documentary, and he put me in Teen Wolf, which is rejuvenated I know it sounds funny, but it has rejuvenated my career because it has given me a confidence, it's excited me, and it's given me access to these fans that are nothing but loving. These fans, there's never negative, when it comes to Teen Wolf.
Right. So, and then they're coming out, discovering your comedy for the first time. And going, this guy's amazing.
Not only my comedy, stand-up comedy.
Right. These
people have never been to comedy shows before. And so now they come out and see my show, and then they go see other comedy shows, and they become comedy fans.
That's why you don't regret doing it. or having gone through that, it's made you a better comic, made you a better person, I guess. You say Jerry's taught you how to be a celebrity.
I'll never be fully accepted, and I understand that.
Yeah, you're an outsider.
I'm an outsider. I'm a comedy outsider. I've always been a comedy outsider. I mean, I feel it when I see some of these, alternative rooms. And
do you get on there?
I do. I did one last week, and it's just I didn't connect with them. It wasn't. I felt like they're so anti-structure, and I'm a structuralist, that I felt like I had to do a character that was so what I but what I learned was I got to just be me. Right. Me, I feel works.
Now you've done Pete Holmes' podcast this week, I believe, right? And that reaches 100,000 people, and a lot of that crowd, a lot of the alternative crowd, right? And so, hey, maybe this will be your acceptance.
I certainly don't think it hurts that people like a Pete would align themselves with me. I hope people see that I love comedy, and that's why I'm doing it. But I don't. I've come to the point where, if people don't accept, I guess that's my lot in life. I have so much to be grateful for, and I really love what I do, and I hope that comes through on stage. I can't control everything. And, I put myself in this position. I take ownership.
So you are a structuralist. You do have files and files and files. You did.
Still do.
Yeah, you do, and they've grown.
Yeah.
Like, is that an old school thing? Like, I always think of Uncle Milty. Those guys. Joan Rivers had files and jokes.
The note cards.
Bob Hope. Is that something that is unusual now, or do a lot of people do it? Do you know?
You know what? I see, when I'm in the green room, I see a lot of people have notes.
Notes. They have their notebooks, but yours are, sorted and not sorted.
Yeah, I you know what? I enjoy it. I enjoy it. To me, I know this sounds so geeky, but I loved college, and I loved putting together a research paper. And that, to me, is what a bit is. So when I did that bit last night, to me, it's exciting that I know that humans have been on the earth for 300,000 years, and that I get to Google it and research pyramids. And it's putting together a thesis, and it's presenting it. And the organization I enjoy. I don't really, you have a life. I don't. I'm not married. I have no kids. I'm bored most of the time. I don't particularly have a lot of friends. So my notes are my friends. My audience is my friends for the night. You're my friend right now. It's who I am. When I was a kid, was it Harper's, I think, did a piece on me. That guy destroyed me. But he was fascinated that I used to alphabetize my Halloween candy.
Oh, that's right. I think I heard about that.
So it's who I am.
Yeah.
But take Dave Chappelle, who's an unbelievable comic and comedic mind. He doesn't write in that fashion, but his stuff is unbelievable. So it doesn't mean what I'm doing is more valid. Mm-hmm. I don't look at, to me, it's fascinating the way Chappelle works.
Do you have a book in you?
I'd love to write a screenplay. I'd love to write a book. Just
from your notes, you could compile them.
Yeah, I don't. It takes a certain confidence, and I don't have the confidence to write a book and believe that it would be read. I don't know why. I don't know why. Do you, now having gotten to know me, do you have a different impression of me than you did from comedian?
Oh, totally. And from talking to you last year on the phone. I mean, we really only see, I've now talked to you 3 times. And watching Comedian again today, especially, seeing the short little snippets of your comments and the way they were all put together. Yeah, of course I do. Of course I do. From that time, 15 years ago, whenever it was, 14 years ago. And I guess it was good that you were an antagonist. It makes a film more interesting. Somebody to cheer for, somebody to root against. But it was a huge pleasure to see you perform for the first time last night. It was fantastic. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night. Huh. So, yeah. I don't know. Like, who you are, you say that is who you are on stage, and you don't have a life. But do you have other interests? What do you do when you're not thinking about comedy?
Everything, all my thoughts are put in categories, bit, screenplay, possible book, whatever, you know what I mean? I feel like my mind's constantly running in those categories. So I guess besides that, I look to distract myself, to shut my mind off. This is why I believe a lot of people do drugs or athletics or drink. It's the great escape. And so sports, I enjoy watching sports, which is something new in my adult life. I wasn't into it in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now I'm really into sports.
What's your sport?
I love basketball, and I love playing basketball, and I love watching football. Fights. I enjoy, the one-on-one, how they train, the art behind that. I love backstories. I'm in boxing. I'm fascinated that by the time the guy starts walking out till he gets to the ring, they've given a 30-second backstory that you get to decide if you want to root for the guy or not. It's incredible writing, and I'm fascinated. It's
like the Olympics, right? We don't care about those sports at all, but you get to know the Olympian story, and then you're like, wow, I hope this guy does great.
Well, that's how I got into sports, was real sports with Brian Gumbel. And I saw the humanity. I saw the people behind it. I saw the backstory, and I go, now I'm interested. Now I want to know, this is what this person had to overcome. And I love a good comeback story.
First two words I wrote in my notes today, and we didn't even do it, really.
Brian Gumbel?
Backstory.
Backstory.
Because I'm interested in that, too.
Yeah.
Interested in yours. So we got to know you as a working comic before you got onto comedian. But as a child growing up, you didn't know you were going to be a comedian, did you?
I always had a sense that I wanted to perform in some respect.
Even from the age of what?
Really young.
So
really young.
You were performing for your family.
Well, I remember my dad was at a bar in New York City and got Rock Hudson's autograph.
Oh, really?
And he gave it to me. And I said to my dad, I'm going to be famous someday, and I'm not going to sign autographs, so they're worth more money. And I told somebody famous that story when I was not even out of high school. I can't remember who it was, and they said, you're going to lose all your fans. And I sort of had a sense. I had a sense that I sort of felt like I saw things differently. And I had this need to express myself. And I would go to sleep, and I'd wake up at 11:30, and I'd watch Carson, and I'd watch Letterman, and I'd write down the bits, and I would tell them in school the next day. And then teachers let me do them before class. Mrs. Schaller let me do it before Spanish class, and I'd get up in front of the class and perform the bits.
Who do you remember doing?
I remember doing Letterman and Johnny Carson's.
Their bits,
their
not
monologues.
the comics that were.
No,
on.
their monologues.
Okay.
I was fascinated by those monologues and those jokes, and I did it.
Topical material for the class.
Yeah, these kids have no idea what I'm talking about, but whatever. And so I was always interested, and I was an outsider in high school too. Nothing's changed in my life. So I'd go to the parties with the popular kids. I'd get invited out sometimes, but I wasn't in. I wasn't in 100%. Just like with comedy, I'm not in 100%. So, I don't know what formed me. I don't know. There isn't like an incident. I had a idyllic childhood. Went to camp. Had bikes. There wasn't anything. No hardships. I loved my childhood. I loved the freedom of getting on my bike in the morning and going cross town, and my parents having no idea where I was, and I had to be home at 5. And if she wanted to find me, she would call the Sidmans or whoever, and where is he?
This was in Boston,
Lexington, a really small town,
right.
And it was safe, and it was really nice playing basketball all day. I don't remember ever eating. Like eating got in the way of life. Now it's life. It's all I look forward to. What's the next meal?
Were you Orny then?
No, Adam. My real name is Adam Orenstein. And if you notice, I still have trouble saying it, Adam Orenstein. It's hard for me to say, and I didn't like that people immediately knew I was Jewish. I was self-conscious about that. Not that there's,
not being Jewish, but just them knowing that before they knew anything else about
because
you.
Then right away they go, he's Jewish. That's the first thought.
Right.
So it must be what African Americans feel. Like the first thought we have is he's black, but I was able to conceal it. My heroes were Woody Allen, who changed his name, and Bob Dylan, who changed his name. Like there's a great lineage of Jews who unjewed themselves. And although
Woody Allen didn't become less Jewish. Though.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But Alan Konigsberg. That's
right.
Yeah. I just didn't want it to be the first impression. There's never been any shame, and I'm the first to admit it. And
so
again,
the family doesn't mind.
I think it took him a while. My grandfather agreed with me. He said that Orenstein, which is O-R-E-N, he should have changed it to O-R-N. Now, I still retain my legal name. I didn't, when I come into Canada, my passport says Adam Orenstein. But for years, I didn't want to discuss it. Now, I don't care. And for years, it was call me Orny. It was very militant. Now, it's like whatever you feel comfortable, with. Orny is a persona. I felt like I had wanted to create something that was separate from my legal name and who I was. I don't know. Now, I'm confused. I don't know what.
You go by Orny though, like even when you're off stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I never introduce myself as Adam.
In your thoughts, are you Adam?
No. Dylan has an interesting thing where he says, some people are just born into the wrong name. He goes, I was just never Robert Zimmerman. It just wasn't who I was. I was Bob Dylan. And Orny just feels like who I am. It bothers the hell out of me that it sounds like horny, because that to me is not, it's totally different. It's
not who you are?
No. Growing up, what was interesting was when I went to camp, people called me Orn or Orny. That was
like a nickname.
Yeah. Then I went to college, and again, I didn't say, hey, call me Orn or Orny. People started calling me Orn or Orny. I was just Orny. It was like one name. And I said, I'm going to be like Madonna. See, do you understand the arrogance I had? I'm going to be a one-name wonder. I'm going to be Madonna, Elvis, right?
Cher.
So I called the comedy club, the Funny Bone, to book myself, and I said, now, I wasn't 21. I thought you needed to be 21 to get into these clubs. So I said, they go, what's your name? And I said, it's Orny. And the person, this is an absolute true story. What's your last name? I go, last name? And one of my fraternity brothers, Jim Georges, who was in the room, said, Adams. I go, Adams. And that was the birth of Orny Adams. Jim Georges gave me my last name.
Quick thinking.
Yeah, I was going to be just Orny. It looked good and bold, and it's Orny. But it drives me nuts that people think horny. It's ugh.
So it was that was your first time on stage. Had you compiled all those jokes from Carson and Letterman? Like, were you keeping notes of their jokes too?
I had a notebook that for school, and on the back where the cardboard was, on the inside, I wrote down. I still have it. All the premises that I had, really weak jokes that I thought were strong. I was dating a girl, and after 6 months, I finally used the L word, leave. And you can almost hear Woody in there, leave. And structured, and these were the jokes I was going to bring on stage. And I remember bringing one joke that I had heard a comic do in Boston. And, at the time you weren't aware that you weren't supposed to be doing other people's, material.
Yeah.
And again, I went up on stage and I said, I heard that, maybe it was in New York. I saw a comic once said, and this was in the height of AIDS. Everyone's worried, can you get AIDS from sitting on a toilet seat? And I think he said, you can if you sit down before the other guy gets up. And I think that was one of the jokes. But I had to audition for the Funny Bone. I had to get on stage in the middle of the day. This is how humiliating and degrading this business can be. It would be a room like this at this time, empty, pitch dark, light on me, and I'd have to do 3 minutes of material to somebody in the booker in the back of the room.
Not laughing.
And then she approved me and gave me a week emceeing at the Funny Bone in Buckhead. And I did the week. And on the Sunday, they said, could you announce that the club is now closing? this is the final show. And I should have known then. Get out of the business. And I still remember the punchline in Atlanta, trying to get booked there, and the booker, this lady Lisa, I still track her career, selling flowers now, told me, "You're just not funny." And I thought, how dare you tell me I'm not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're one person, and you can say it's not my type of humor. But again, you know how I feel about sweeping, emphatic statements.
No, I'm with you. I learned that from Steve Allen.
From
his book, Funny People. He said, you can't say somebody's not funny. You see them, people are laughing. You say he's not funny to me.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying. Own it.
Yeah. When I write now, because I get Steve Allen and Alan King mixed up sometimes. So I go,
Big difference.
Big difference. So I wrote a bit about, that obituary bit that I did last night about how we can leave comments.
Oh, you can leave comments now. Yeah, online. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So now I'm researching that. And I'm reading all the obituaries because I've never really read them. And it's always, he's survived by. And I thought, it's fascinating that living is so difficult. It's like you're surviving. You're surviving. So I wrote a whole bit, spent a day writing, was excited about it. It was and I send it out to a few people. This is what I always do. I always float a premise.
Fellow comics?
Always.
Yeah.
Have you heard this before? Because I want to make sure I stay away. And he said, I think Alan King, am I getting it right? Did the survive by?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're a comic listening right now, this is a bit that I highly recommend to watch if you want to understand how to structure a bit, not only writing, but how to build, and to also how to use your voice within a bit to build it to a crescendo. So if you, at the beginning, the whole thing is that he goes, women live longer than men. He goes, it's a fact, right? And he said, I used to do a bit, he said, I used to say, you know why women live longer than men? Because they don't have to be married to that bitch or whatever the joke is, right? And he got all these letters. And so he said, people were furious at me, so now I'm going to actually support the premise and show you why women. Do you know this bit?
Yes, I do, because you tipped me to it before, and I looked it up.
Yes.
Online. It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
It is almost a perfect bit. In fact, it might be the perfect bit, but it's hard to, I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't want to make that statement. But he starts off, he gives obituaries for people to read, and what does it say? Survived by his wife. Yeah, right? Survived by his wife. Then he gives another one. And what does it say there? And the person will start to go, survived by his wife. Cuts her off. And then the next one, survived by his wife. And by the end, he doesn't even let the person read the bit. Survived by his wife. And the place is going, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just when you think the bit can't go a step further, the wife, so broken up by the news that the husband's going to leave her, throws herself from the window and lands on the husband and lives. It was survived. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a true. They're all true obituaries, and it's an amazing piece of comedy.
And you love it, but did it disappoint you that now you couldn't do your survived by his wife bit?
A little bit, but you know what? It was such a better bit. It brings me such joy to see a bit that good. I mean, that bit still holds up. In fact, I now can't wait to get out of here and go watch that bit. You can see me smiling. I legitimately love it. I was going to, on my first Letterman, I read in a newspaper that farmers were being subsidized in the U.S. to not grow crops. The government there was so much of a certain crop, they were paying them to not grow crops. And I thought, I can do that. I can not grow crops. I'm a farmer. My address 14, what kind of farm? And I did on my tax forms, right? And I'm about to do it on Letterman, and somebody said, Brian Regan does a similar bit. Now I'm doing a TV show, right?
Yeah.
So I reach out to his manager, Rory Rosegarden. I said, here's this bit, and I'm thinking of doing it. And I heard Brian, and he said, let me look into it. And he got me a transcript of the entire bit. And it was exactly the bit. Now, I never heard Brian do it. I know the impetus for the thought was the newspaper. Mm-hmm. I knew where it came from in my mind. I had every right to do it. I wouldn't know at that point. And I read it, and I said, could you tell Brian that not only is it the exact same bit, but he takes it 2 steps further and is much funnier than mine. I will never do mine again. And Brian loves to tell that story.
Yeah, and he told me a story about he did a bit for a couple of years that he found out was Dennis Wolfberg's. And so he just had to drop it. And again, he thought Wolfberg did it much better. But yeah.
Yeah, I used to do a bit. It's still, in some markets, it's like a requested bit on sharks. And it was a 10-minute audience interaction bit with people yelling out things, right? And it was just so much fun. It was like this, it was an improv that went in different directions every night that I did it. And somebody came up to me one night and said, Robert Schimmel does a bit. I go, oh, shit. Damn it, because you don't want people to be thinking he got it from Schimmel. So I go online and I find the clip or however it was at the time. I don't know what the technology was, if I was getting tapes or whatever it was. And I find the bit, and God damn it, it's a one-liner. Mine's a 10-minute bit, and his is a one-liner. And,
is it that similar?
Well...
or the premise?
Well, my overall premise wasn't, but one of the lines in it was, if a shark comes at you, you're supposed to kick it in the head, or punch it in the nose.
Yeah.
And then I go, then what are you supposed to do? Poke it in the eye with your new nub or whatever the line was, right? And Schimmel had a very similar. Now, let me tell you something. Now, being in this business as long as I am, and I've been around a lot of really funny people, sometimes when I do a bit, they'll go, last night, my passcodes bit. If somebody came up to me and said, I heard somebody else doing it, I go, perfect. I would expect a comic in every city to have a similar type bit.
Never heard one.
Never heard one. Okay. So there are certain bits that I write that like my female vote joke, where I say, there was a time in this country, women didn't even have the right, and I'm talking about America. There was a time in this country, women didn't even have the right to vote. Then there was a vote to see if they could vote. Well, how the hell did we lose that?
Yes.
So if somebody came up to me and said, I heard someone else, I would say, I'd be highly suspicious. But there are certain premises I do that I think most comedic minds should go to that place. That shark one is a line that, I would assume most people would go, well, it's gonna bite your arm off. Then what do? You poke it in the eye or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and I would set the bit up for 10 minutes. I'd have people go, what are you supposed to do? And people go, poke it in the eye. I go, poke it in the eye? It's a shark. What's it going to go? Just poke me in the eye. Like I do a whole set it up. So when I actually come back to the poking, it's a big deal. And so I ran into Schimmel. We were doing Byron Allen's show, whatever that...
Comedy Unleashed?
Yeah, Comics Unleashed.
Comics Unleashed.
I got thrown off that show.
As Norm Macdonald says, it's the most leashed program there is.
I was on that show with Tom Green. And Tom Green, great Canadian.
Yeah, or a Canadian.
Yeah. He got so mad at that audience, he ran out into the audience. Byron didn't know what to do, and he starts yelling, this audience sucks. They suck. Hey, Orny, you do comedy every week on the road. This audience sucks, right? They suck. Now the audience hates me. So I got thrown off. We were supposed to tape 2 shows in a row with the same audience. They threw me off the second show. And Norm Macdonald was upstairs. And Norm goes, I'm excited to do the show with you. And I go, they just threw me off. He goes, what are you talking about? And I go, yeah, they just said I can't do the show because I did this. And then he goes, it's ridiculous. And they put one of the writers on in my place and stuff like that. And this is why I love Norm. So Byron, and Norm hates the bullshit. So when he's saying it's the most leashed show, he's saying it is so contrived. You're talking about one thing, and then all of a sudden, like this guy's over there talking about trash cans, and then they'll go, Norm, speaking of trash cans, you're from Canada. What is, it's like there's no segue, there's no thought. Right? So he did that the first time, and he threw it to Norm, and he goes, hey, Norm, so you're from Canada. What do you think of? And Norm goes, I have a question. Where's Orny Adams? And Byron got so pissed. They cut. Byron got up. They came back. It was great. It was like another comic sticking up for another comic. So I was there, and Schimmel was ready, about to go on. I said, and Schimmel has since passed away. It's very sad. And he said, I said, Robert, I wanted to talk to you because for a while I was doing a bit on sharks, and it came to my attention that you do a similar bit. I just want you to know, if you ever heard anything, that I didn't take that from you. I'd never heard you do it, and I apologize. And he said, what's your bit? And I walked through that. I was very proud to be telling the great Robert Schimmel one of my bits. And he said, I want you to keep doing it. He goes, your bit is funny. Mine was one line. He goes, you basically have my blessing to do it. And I continued to do it with the confidence, knowing that Robert had given me. And then once he passed away, of course, it was in his honor.
Yeah, and that is good to know. But, of course, the comedy police out there don't know that.
Doesn't matter.
And they will be quick to say, hey, they'll find a timestamp on something. Robert Schimmel did this then, and now look, Orny Adams.
Well, these comedy police, somebody under one of my specials from 2010, in 2012 or 13 said, this guy's a hack. Louis did all this stuff on his new special, which post-dated mine by a couple of years. And, of course, there probably was no similarity, but that's the craziness. I think the comedy police, although it's good that people are policing comedy, listen, we all live in one universe. We're all exposed to the same thing with Twitter, with instant news. On any given night, 1 million people are doing Ebola jokes. You can't, unless somebody is without question stealing, and you can tell when somebody without question is stealing, then it should be brought up. But for the most part, at any given time, me and other comics are going to be hitting. Listen, I do gluten bits. Other people who glutton bits or gluten. You know what I mean? We live in a world that bothers me. I should be able to talk about it. It's like when the comedy police were talking about airplane jokes. Don't do it. It's hacky. Well, you know what? If you can come up with a really good airplane joke, then do it.
Yeah, I've always said no hack premises, only hack comics.
I like to think that the way I do a joke is special to me.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter what the topic is what you bring to it.
And I think what's important about that Schimmel story is to express and show the generosity that comedians do have towards each other. Because I think, I love comics, and that's what was so hurtful in Comedian that I felt like I was taken down by people that I was like, hey man, I love comedy more than anybody. What are you doing? I'm one of you. Comics can also be one of the greatest, most generous group of people, too, and that's a great example of. And same with the Brian Regan. I mean, I have gotten so much spiritually. I've learned so much from like the Shandlings and Seinfelds and people like that. There's a great lineage. There's a great history that we have that it's our duty to pass on. When young comics approach me and ask me a really good, I love when a comic asks a really good comedic question. I go, they get it. They're thinking right. And man, I can't shut up. I want to give them the knowledge that was given to me and pass it on.
Well, these guys like you and Shandling and Seinfeld, you're the varsity. Right? Varsity athletes have a confidence, they don't have rivals so much, so they're not worried about somebody taking their spot. Right? It's the junior varsity. They don't want to be associated with this guy or that guy. I've always looked at it in terms, when I was in university, the varsity athletes would play basketball with us anytime. They just loved to play. The junior varsity didn't want to be seen with us because it would look like they were bad.
Were you that good at basketball?
No, but you didn't have to be. That's what I'm saying. I played all the time.
I
wasn't on the varsity or junior varsity. But and I get that sense with, all walks of life, but here in comedy, right? Shandling and Seinfeld and these guys, very giving and supportive. It's because they're not threatened.
Absolutely. And I think, like I talked about at the beginning, we're just dying to have this conversation with certain people. Seinfeld once asked me if I was married, and I said, I haven't found the right woman. He said, why? He go, I don't know if any woman could ever make me feel the way I feel on stage. And he said, you're right. And when you get off stage, there are certain people I call and I'll go, the monitors were facing the wrong way. And they get it. You don't have to say anymore. It was too hot in the room. You don't have to say anymore. They get the code, because we've all had shows where something there were 4 ladies that were talking the whole time, and it ruined the show. Now, if I told somebody else outside of comedy, they go, well, can't you just ignore them? No, it doesn't work like that. So we're dying to find people that love stand-up as much as we do, so we can have this coded conversation. We're just dying. We don't have enough people in our lives that we can relate to. We're outside. The reason we did comedy was because we're outsiders. That's why if I'm an outsider in comedy, it makes sense. I've been an outsider my whole life. I've never felt accepted. This isn't an unusual feeling for me. In fact, I wouldn't know what to do when I'm accepted. It makes me very uncomfortable. When Gary said take off his sunglasses and look into my eyes, I almost cry. Anytime people if you wrote a really nice article about me, I wouldn't know what to do. So thank you for shitting on me.
I didn't. Are you on good terms with Jerry now?
We don't communicate often, but when we do, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, you should do his show. I like the comedians in cars.
I don't know if I'd ever do a show where he's allowed to edit again.
Oh. But you know what I do notice in that show? You watch it?
He's never asked me to be on that show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you watch it?
I watched a couple of episodes. One episode I was mentioned in, so I watched it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and we get to see how he is a celebrity out amongst people, because he's not afraid. He goes up, hi, how you doing, as you say, and then he moves on. But he's not ignoring them. He's not feeling, another person coming up to me. He's very generous in a way.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be a great comedian, as he is, you have to be a man of the people. The minute you're not, and you're not able to sit amongst and observe, you're done. Because no great joke has been written from a mansion on a hill in isolation. You have to be in the mud with everybody else, and to feel that angst. What I think is fascinating about life is, and I've wanted to do a show where billionaire problems. We all have problems, and that's what you need to tap into. But yeah, you got to be a person, a human being, or else you're not going to relate to the person on stage.
Well, Orny, we got to end it, but
I can't believe the batteries lasted long.
Well, that's why I plugged it in. You clearly tell your enthusiasm and love for comedy, and you take it seriously, and that's why it shows on stage. I mean, you live it. By the way, Jerry didn't get married till he was in his 50s, right?
No, I think it was his 40s.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was old. Maybe his kids when he was in his 50s.
Yeah. Huh.
There's time for you.
Yeah, there's time. I never felt like I could financially, until recently, take care of a woman and a family if that was something that needed to be done. And I didn't feel like I knew who I was. I feel like, I understand myself better. I don't think we would have been having this conversation 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So to me, it was work on yourself, love yourself, understand yourself, then bring somebody else in.
Are we good?
I really enjoyed this, and I enjoyed this conversation. Now, whether it's true or not, because I've had the perception that you love comedy and you get comedy, and you allowed me to open up in a way and share with you, and I appreciate it. And I hope I didn't say anything that I will regret and be desecrated for by my peers. But I thank you from my heart.
Well, no, I thank you for disagreeing with me and then also wanting to hash it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I like that.
I was at the Comedy Magic Club, and a comic, I won't say who it was doing a bit on stage, and I was in the green room, and I go, "That's my bit." Wait a minute, this is where it was the pharmacy bit, which I sort of did a little bit of last night. It's normally a much longer bit, and I go, "Wait, this is where I'm at the candy aisle," and then now I'm in the back and he's hitting all my points, and I said, "Oh, he's doing my bit." And I went on my phone and I played it for the green room. I go, "That's my," and everyone was like, "Oh my God." So the guy got off stage. Now, in some cases, comics fly off the handle. They're going to yell. They're going to punch the person. And I went up to him. I go, "Hey, nice set." And he said to me, he goes, it was really funny, really interesting. He said, "Did you see the pharmacy bit?" And And I go, it's interesting you bring that up because I have that exact bit. And he goes, oh my God, are you kidding? And I'll tell you what happened. I know exactly what happened. He must have subconsciously, walking through the room or whatever, heard me do it at one point, but it didn't resonate or register. And it just sort of, he thought it was his thought. And his mind must have, in some recess of his mind, knew that I was the author of that bit. That's why he came up to me and said, what'd you think of the pharmacy? But I could tell.
On a subconscious level, yeah.
And he said, he goes, I'm so embarrassed. I hope nobody thought I stole from you. I will never, because the sound guy came, 2 people from the club came up to me and said, isn't that your bit? And I can tell you with 100% certainty, he did not consciously take that bit from me. And the people that were there, now he tweeted to me the next day and he said, that was one of the coolest interactions I've ever had with a comic. That's how everything should be settled in this business. With maturity and going, hey, do you know, just so you know, hey, you can, I always say, just so you know, I've got a similar, but you can keep doing it, but I want you to know I've got a similar. And that's what I feel this was. It's like, I feel like I understand you better. I hope you understand me better. And I think that we wouldn't have war if people dealt on this level.
Exactly. We should be running the world.
Absolutely.
Orny for president.
Am I supposed to be funnier on this podcast?
Yeah, can we start again? Orny, thanks so much.
No, thank you.
Okay. Good talk, right? Right? I won, didn't I? Oh, no, it's not about that. It's about the conversation. It's about the back and forth. I really love those kinds of conversations, and Orny was a great guest, and thank him for talking to me and coming to town. Hope to see him next time, and maybe he'll come back on the show. Thanks for listening, hanging in there throughout the extra long episode, but I think it was worth it. I think you probably enjoyed that. So keep listening, won't you? And go over and give us a rating or a comment at iTunes or wherever you find podcasts. Because, we desperately need it. Okay, thanks for listening. Good night.